Winner of the Edgar Allan Poe Award, which is essentially the Hugo for Mysteries, if I'm understanding that correctly, and Writers of the Future winner, please welcome Eric Heideman.
Testing? Yes. Years ago, I wrote a story in collaboration with David R. Leslie. More recently, Royce Booth and I turned it into a novel and sold it to Indie Authors Press. Without further ado, the first few pages of Raiders of the Seventh Planet. Chapter 1. It was a bright, cold day on the planet Uranus. The upper atmospheric temperature hovered around 300 degrees below 0 Fahrenheit. A perfect day for the annual US, all ages, ski trip and weekend retreat. People eagerly boarded the steed train, clattering equipment and chattering up a storm. Doleful stay-at-home mothers gave out last-minute instructions and sage words of advice. Remember, Filbert, honey, dear, that if you kiss an unwed woman, your upper lip will fall off. Fool around with the sharp reins if you can't control yourself. Mom, Filbert protested. She patted the tow-headed former urchin on the head. There, that's a good boy. The teens were impatient, very impatient, and they all knew that your upper lip would not fall off under any ordinary rational circumstances, especially by means of reaching first base. The second idea, however, didn't sound too bad, especially in regards to Miss Jill. More on her later. She was hot. The teen girls and boys dressed against the potential chill in separate units, mostly due to their belonging to good Protestant families. Finally, they were all in one of the units of the steed train that would take them along Route 66 from us through perfect ambush paths to the designated ski slopes. To pass the semi-tedious time, the senior citizens played bingo, and the younger adults played 20 questions, while the teens and kids gorged on cookies and milk and got to know one another better through sing-alongs, pantomimes, and interpretive dance. Jill, the chaperone, see, and it is later, looked out her window and thought something. The others nearby stared at her. Wasn't she having any fun? Time passed. Meanwhile, a huge spaceship from Earth closely approached its ex-urban neighbor, the planet Uranus. The crew, some 7,000 strong, received an audio directive. Your attention, crew. Everyone who can be spared from their tasks must make like a tree does to the ship's auditorium. Upon doing so, the crew looked at the stage upon which stood the captain and a bewhiskered man with horn rims whose clothes didn't match. Good morning, crew, the captain said. We'll be arriving at our destination in a little over an hour. We had been hoping to prep you with the talk by our ship's science officer, but he called in sick, so we've called in our substitute science officer. Let's have a warm welcome for Sub-Science Officer Aaron Hinckley. Silence reigned through the auditorium. Far in the back, someone coughed twice. Good morning. Mr. Hinckley adjusted the microphone. Morning. As some of you will recall from astronomy class, Uranus, the seventh planet from our sun, Sol, was discovered in 1781 by musician and amateur astronomer William Herschel. It was the first planetary wanderer not known from ancient times. Uranus, a Roman god, was father to Saturn, who in turn was father to Jupiter, the king of the gods. The planet Uranus is almost 2 billion miles farther out from the sun than the Earth, a distance which, as you will recall, we have just spent 27 months traversing. Uranus, along with its outer solar system neighbors, Jupiter, Saturn, and Neptune, is a gas giant, consisting of a thin gaseous outer layer, a liquid middle layer containing a heady mix of hydrogen, helium, methane, and, lucky for us, a certain amount of water, and a dense rocky inner layer. Some scientists have speculated that it doesn't have the two inner layers, simply consisting of a ball of gas that gets incredibly dense as one approaches its center. Imagine that, folks. A ball of gas big enough to hold 16 Earths. Sub-Science Officer Aaron Hinckley grinned. We're about to prove that those scientists are all full of gas themselves. He chuckled to himself against a background of silence. He continued, Uranus has lots of moons. We used to think there were 5, but we keep finding more. And several sets of rings, though they aren't as big as Saturn's. An eccentric planet, Uranus rotates sideways compared to the solar system's other worlds. A voice from a middle row called out, Is there life on Uranus? We think so. That's why we're here. Gravity is 91% of Earth normal, which should put a spring in your step. The examples of Australia, New Zealand, Mars, Venus, and Europa show that life can develop very differently when evolving in an isolated locale. But the Alan Garrett Parallel Earths adventures teach us that the world, in many ways very different from our own, can bear striking similarities. Coincidence? Mr. Hinckley ducked as a single paper airplane, then another, then a cascade of planes and spitballs landed near him. Hinckley tipped an imaginary hat and ran off stage. The wind shrieked through the cranky mountains. Genghis Twerp looked down from his strategically sound, rugged mountain pass upon the multi-hued organic steed train passing underneath. An idea slipped into his wrinkled, barbaric mind. Rake, he thought. He lifted his bone horn and aimed at the lead steed. Jill Pixwell Garangi Strugus was now in the back row of the bus, pitching woo with Penny Smith, a fellow chaperone under a tarp beneath the gray moons of Uranus. "Oh, Pixwell Garangi," her nickname, he shrieked. "You are so forceful. Are you having fun yet?" All Jill Pixwell Garangi Strugus could manage to say was, Suddenly, the shrill shriek of a bone horn cut through the silent, cooling air. A boulder caught the lead steed squarely in the chest, causing it to jerk free from the steed coupling and roll into a ditch. But no animals were harmed in the composition of this novel. The hole in this juncture between steeds hissed with escaping air and screaming senior citizens. Moved by these panicky noises, the remaining steeds rearranged the train into a circle. Genghis Twerp then unleashed his barbaric horde of slavering, unhygienic mungi. They leaped from the surrounding hilltops, which were craggy and rugged, warmed by the distant but radiant orb of the sun, from which, did they but know it, a strange menace was about to descend upon their peaceful yet rustic planet, brandishing their gleaming silver swords and drooling with bloodlust. In the bus, Jill Pixwell Garangi Strugus was finally satisfied. Unfortunately, Peony, overstimulated by pitching woo and by the steed crash up ahead, lay comatose. Jill Pixwell Garangi Strugus took charge of the situation by pulling from Peeny's pants a pocket watch and hurling it at the lead munge, striking him about the head and shoulders, causing his upper torso to separate partially from his body and his dandruff problem to cease forthwith. But the mungi as a collective whole were not phased. They retreated to a distance of about 30 yards and began to hurl insults with piercing, reckless abandon. "Presbyterians eat snuff," shouted the largest and fiercest-looking munge. "The mungi are fungi," the teens and kids chanted back. "The mungi are fungi, the 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 mungi are fungi. "Your mother's baked lousy cornbread," shouted a smaller, more surreptitious munge. Now the non-voting age potential skiers were outraged, livid even. They dug into their lunch pails and threw tomatoes, screaming, "Munges eat sponges, munges eat sponges, munges eat sponges, munges eat sponges." Genghis Twerp stood upon the hilltop and surveyed the battle. Yeah, he thought, this is pretty good plunder, yep, but it's time for these softening up tactics to end. He sent for his most trusted messenger, a hunchback, sloth-eyed sadist with an equally bad complexion named Frank. "Yes, boss," asked Frank. "What can I do for you?" "Frank, quite frankly, I don't like the way our troops are hanging back. By crud. Don't they know that the bus is manned by midgets? They're trying to sneak their gold through on the ski slopes," said Genghis Twerp, knowing how the mungi hated midgets and loved gleaming gold. Frank bolted down the ski hill, screaming, "They're not kids, they're midgets, and they're hoarding gold, hoarding, ag!" Beneath the chortling eyes of Genghis Twerp, the enraged mungi charged headlong, literally, at the bus. Already weakened by the 90-minute barrage of insults, the teens looked in dismay to Jill, who alone among them still maintained a cool exterior. Jill Pixwell Garangi Strugus looked back, thinking, what the hell am I supposed to do? The schnussball coach elbowed her way into the teens' organic train component. "Jill," she said, "the kids are worn out from all the name-calling and bullying by those nasty munges. You've got to get them to safety." Jill shrugged. "It's not like I'm unwilling, I'm just fresh out of ideas." The coach scowled at Jill. "I thought you majored in planetary science in college. Surely you remember that our planet rotates sideways in relation to our solar system's other worlds. In times of extreme stress, it is possible to access that sideways energy, especially when compounded with the special energy generated by miners to open a sort of doorway to somewhere else." Jill said, "Yeah, I remember reading about that, but it struck me as pretty theoretical." The coach shrugged in return. "Can you think of a better time to test the theory?" Working in tandem, Jill and the coach vacated the kids and teens, and the still sleeping Peony, whom Joe carried with an arm under his shoulder from the steed train and gathered them in a small clump of land within the steed train's protective circle. The coach and Jill began singing and clapping, their hands to old Rockefeller camp songs. One by one, the young people woke up, finally even Peony, and joining in, singing, dancing, clapping, shouting, to the background noise of Munjai, raving, or were they just raving, and screaming, coming ever closer. Then a door did open in the air, and a cyclone descended upon them, and an armada of eagles dove to carry the kids away. The soundtrack rose to operatic levels as the sky got really bright. Then, as quickly as it takes to tell, the sound and light and wind ceased. The kids went on to another level of adventures, which this novel may or may not get around to chronicling. Maybe, possibly, we'll see. The coach brushed a tear out of her eye. Good luck, kids. Then the Munjai reached the speed train and the slaughter began. Suddenly the sky of Uranus was lit by much light. Metallic objects were descending slowly through layers of the semi-liquid atmosphere, armed to the teeth with heat weapons and terrifying insignia. Eagerly the enormous crew of space-happy Earthlings looked from potholes and over the gun sights. No oil wells? Inquired the captain, blinking. And it's available from Amazon.